Greetings and welcome to another edition of The Pedal Shift Project. The Pedal Shift Project is a series of conversations, thoughts, and experiments on bicycle travel adventures. From tips and tricks to ideas on how to ride your ride, let's shrink the world by bike. Show notes and more are available at pedalshift.net/360, and you can email the show at pedalshift@pedalshift.net or text me at 202-930-1109 and check Pedal Shift out on all the socials as well. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 360th edition of the Pedal Shift Project. My name's Tim Mooney. Thanks so much for joining. On this edition, we are going to do something a little bit different. I am by far not an expert in mindfulness, but of course, that won't stop me from talking about it. And we're going to be talking about mindfulness in bicycle travel. Now, for those of you who are completely unaware of the concept of mindfulness, it's related to, meditation, yoga, and some other things. Now, for many of you, you're about ready to hit stop on this entire podcast, or skipping or moving on, or maybe saving it for later. And that's fine. I get that. That's cool. I am not like a really well-practiced person in this area, but I'm really attracted to it because my partner has been into mindfulness and yoga and meditation for quite a bit longer than I ever have been. But the one thing that I have noticed is that I think that the one area where I practice mindfulness is when I'm on a bicycle. And you may too. And the reason is because I think that it's a very meditative, very present practice. And I thought that I would talk about it a little more explicitly on this edition of the pod. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about this in terms of real basics and how I see mindfulness and bicycle travel coexisting together. And I think that you may learn a thing or two about all that. For those of you who are much more deep into a mindfulness practice, I hope this is helpful and just sort of drawing parallels to the type of work that you do on your own in your own practice. And then last but not least, I thought I would do something a little bit different and that I would share 3 stories of mindfulness and bicycle travel. These were all helpfully generated and will be read to you thanks to our friends in the AI space. And they're fun, actually. It was a fun way to go about doing it. So I thought that we would wrap things up with that. So let's start off by talking about understanding mindfulness in the bicycle travel space. When we talk about mindfulness in bicycle travel, we mean paying close attention to our experiences and our feelings while we're biking. It's like when you really, really focus on a story that a friend or a colleague is telling you, except instead of listening to someone else and really being part of that conversation, you're listening to what's going on both around you and inside of you. And that can be also what you're thinking about as well. Being present is another term that we hear about a lot in this space. I'm being present. And that means that you're enjoying each moment of your ride without worrying at all about what you have to do later. So it's about feeling the wind, the breeze, noticing the hills that you're climbing or descending, and even being aware of your own breathing. And that's particularly true in a climb, I find. Self-awareness is another term that we hear a lot in this space, and that's when you pay attention to your own thoughts and your feelings. So, for example, if you start feeling tired, you notice that, but you notice it without making a judgment around it. You don't get upset that you're tired. You just notice that you're tired. And that can be true of any other physical feeling that you may have as well, that you notice it and you acknowledge it, but don't necessarily react to it. That's being present and self-awareness. Another thing that we hear in this space a lot is about non-judgmental observations. And that's what I was just talking about there with the self-awareness. That's when you basically look at things as they are without deciding if it's good or bad. Now, you may have an opinion on that. And this may be the hardest part of mindfulness for you. So for instance, when it starts raining, if you're riding, instead of getting upset that it's raining, you just notice the rain and you keep riding. And one of our stories actually is going to speak to that. Sometimes I've talked about in the past about how we take something that happens that we don't have control over and we roll with it. That's sort of what non-judgmental observation is. And by understanding that and all of the other ideas that I talked about here, I think it can help make your bike trips more fun because you see and appreciate more of the things that are around you, things that are a part of the ride, even the smallest kind of elements of the sounds of leaves crunching under your tires, the sound of the wind, the rain as it hits your skin, that all can really contribute to making your ride all the much better. And it's all part of what mindfulness is. Okay, so when you're getting ready for any kind of a bicycle trip, what I would recommend is that you integrate mindfulness into everything about that trip. And it all starts off with mindful planning. And it can be really helpful. I think that I've talked about these types of concepts without naming them as I've been going along here. So mindful planning is essentially thinking carefully about where you want to go and what you want to see. So this all gets into why I consider myself a bit of a planner here. For many of you who don't consider yourselves planners necessarily, I think you can still do mindful planning as a part of a ride where maybe you're not going to go down to the details that I would, but you think about what you hope to get out of a trip. Are you interested in seeing a beautiful place? Are you interested in riding to get stronger? Do you have some kind of a goal in mind with all of that? That can be a part of mindful planning. And another parallel to all of that is setting intentions and goals for your ride. And I've talked about that. I feel like I talked about that sometime last year, about goal setting and how that can be helpful. In setting an intention is something that we do in the meditation space. And I think you can do that here as a part of your ride. It can be as simple as deciding to notice something new every day, or to ride a certain number of miles, or to get to a particular campsite, or any of those types of things. You end up setting some kind of a goal that you want to hit. And you may have sub goals. And I think I talked about that in the goal setting episode, where you have like a short, medium, and long goal. And those are all ways that you can hit them. When you choose your routes and your destinations with that kind of mindfulness, you might pick places that make you feel a certain way. Maybe might make you feel calm because you know you're going to be going to a place that's really chill and mellow and you won't have a lot of people around you. Or it might be really exciting because you're going to end up at a place with a big, huge vista, or maybe you're going to go surfing at the end of it, or any of a variety of different ways that it can make you feel excited. You're often going to be choosing those things because of your feelings, not because they are necessarily popular. But maybe you'll pick stuff because they're popular too, and that in turn makes you excited. Planning like this doesn't just make sure you have a good trip. It also helps you feel more connected to whatever adventure you're having. And that could be a huge adventure where you're bike packing way out into the sticks, and it's really going to put pressure on you. You're really pushing yourself. Or it could just be a short ride to go get ice cream. It's setting that intention and goal and being mindful about it and intentional about it. And that really can make a big difference with how you connect your ride to this ultimate goal. And that's a really helpful thing. Okay, so next. I talked about this before. I used this phrase before, and that is being present. So imagine you're riding your bike down a quiet path. Instead of thinking about work stress or your project or what's for dinner, instead you focus on the here and now while you're riding, what's in front of you. That is called being present. You might notice how the air feels. Is it warm? Is it cool? Is it really humid out? Is it dry? What are you hearing around you? What are those sounds? Do you hear a lot of birds chirping? Are you hearing cicadas? Do you hear nothing? Do you hear wind? What do you smell? Are you smelling fresh cut grass because someone's mowing somewhere nearby? Do you smell the flowers that are blooming? Around here in DC, this is the big flower blooming time of year. And there's at the corner around from where I live, there's a big lilac tree. And every time you get within about a half a block of it, you start smelling it. That's the kind of stuff that really brings you into the moment. You can be really present when you're acknowledging and you're seeing or smelling or hearing those types of things. So to stay mindful while you're riding, you can do something that a lot of folks in meditation do, and that's to practice deep breathing. That's one way to do that. Notice your breath. Or you can pay attention to what each of your senses is experiencing. So are you really focusing on the smells? We often really talk about the sights, or maybe even how our bodies are feeling when we're riding. So maybe think about swapping it up a little bit and thinking, okay, what is the smell here? Oh, I'm getting close to the ocean. I'll give you an example. When I'm climbing up Leggett Hill, and then of course Rockport / Middle Finger Hill, one of the things you notice, in addition to the fact that you're really tired from all the climbing, is at a certain point, especially towards the end of getting up Rockport Hill there, you start smelling the ocean. And that is a really exciting moment there. That's part of being present. You realize more than just the mileage marker that your alternative senses are sort of telling you where you're at. And that's a really powerful way to enjoy the ride. And it's a way of getting ready for that really awesome, cool, thrilling descent. So that's one way to think about all of that. Other things that you can think about, you can listen to the sound your tires make on different surfaces, especially if you're going over different types of surfaces. You're transitioning maybe from gravel to pavement or back again. Maybe you're going over leaves. That's a really, really grounding, present thing about cycling, how our tires meet the surface. It's a really major part of riding. The weather, of course, as we always talk about, is a huge thing. Is the sun out? Do you feel the sun sort of warming one side of your body but not the other? That's another really way to tune into the environment as you are riding. I think that there are thousands of different ways that you can look at all of this. But the nice thing about this kind of thing is you can also share those moments with your friends, your family, your loved ones, and showing how powerful it can be to really, live every moment of your ride. That's a really awesome part of being present and enjoying the moment of your ride, but also sharing that with other folks. Now, maybe you're not going to be doing this with just everybody out there. You're going, hey, you know what? I noticed that the sun, when it hit me on one side, I felt warm there and cool on the other side. Maybe you're not going to overshare like that, but I think that being present is part of acknowledging all of that, and then you choose to share the highlights with other folks. I think that's a really powerful thing. Okay, so now I think, and I mentioned this before, but I think it's worth really highlighting here, having a real mindful relationship with the encounters that you have with both nature and with the people around you that you encounter, the culture, if you will. It goes without saying that bicycling can take you to amazing places and help you meet really interesting people. I've talked about that so much on the show that sometimes it's the people that you meet more than the ride that matters, certainly for me at least. But when you ride with mindfulness in mind, that's a weird way of saying it, but when you ride mindfully, how about we say it like that? You can have special moments both with the nature that you interact with, and once you get amongst people, the local communities. And I talked a little bit about that last episode with the urban bicycle travel. Out when you're on a trail or you're someplace that's much more remote, maybe you'll run into wildlife, say a deer that's sort of peeking around the corner or from behind a tree or something along those lines. Maybe you watch birds fly by. Maybe you notice the squirrels darting about. Maybe even run across a snake. I've done that a few times on a bunch of different trails, just sunning themselves on the trail. I mean, that's a real moment right there. And then you to really reflect on that, even if it's an animal that you see a lot. Like I see squirrels all the time in DC, but every once in a while it's fun to just sort of stop, especially when I'm on the bike out on the C&O trail, just watching them and what they're doing and darting about, maybe playing with each other or interacting with each other. It's a cool thing. But once you get into, the city or the town or something like that, running into people and, sometimes, you'll get stories from them. Maybe somebody will tell you about the history of the place that you're at. Someone will tell a story about themselves, tell them more about yourself. We talked about it with the documentary earlier this year, and I hope a bunch of you got a chance to see that, about just interacting with folks and learning their stories and understanding things. I thought that was a really powerful way to integrate a bike ride into your life. I mean, of course, that was done in a very different way, about going out without food or money or anything like that to see how people would help him. However, I think we can do it in different ways and interact with folks in ways that are more commonly done in a bicycle travel scenario. And you can really learn a lot that way. The big thing that I would say is that being open and being curious, those are the two different things. I think they're different sides of the same coin in a lot of different ways. You really can learn a lot about the environment that you're in, and also maybe folks who don't look like you or who are different than you or are not really interested in bicycling. I don't know how many times I've run into people who are just absolutely fascinated by me being out and about on my bike or doing big miles. And one of the things they'll say, and I'm sure you've run into this too, oh, I could never do that, or you're crazy or stuff like that. But still, I end up having an interaction with them and I learn from them as well. I think that it makes me be more appreciative. It makes me understand how other people live and also the natural world around me. So no matter where you're at, you have an opportunity to be open and learn if you open yourself up for that. And that's, I think, a really important thing. I think that for a lot of us, that's really easy. For some of us, that might be a lot harder. You're more stuck in your ways. You have a worldview that you're sort of like, nope, this is it. I would encourage you to try to be more open and try to learn more as well. And you may find yourself reinforcing your worldview, or you may find yourself going, I never thought about it that way. Maybe I should reconsider what I'm doing. I think that there's a lot to be said about being open and curious. All right. So I think that mindfulness in this next example is probably, I think, the most important tool for me that I sort of stumbled upon. And, well, anytime you're encountering a challenge, I think that mindfulness can be a real tool for you. So I don't have to tell you this. I've demonstrated it on this show a bunch of different times. Sometimes a bike trip can be really tough. You may face hills that are steeper than you intended. You don't have the energy left in your day for them. Or you may end up hitting weather that you weren't anticipating, or weather that you were anticipating, but it's way worse than you thought it would be, and it makes you want to quit. In these instances, mindfulness can be a real superpower that you have available to you because it helps you deal with difficult situations calmly and confidently. If you start feeling frustrated by what's going on around you, the steep hill, the weather that kind of sucks in the moment, the trail conditions that are just terrible to get through, using mindfulness to stay calm is a huge help, and you wouldn't expect it, but trust me, it is. Taking deep breaths, focusing in on what you can do in the moment, avoiding focusing in on the things that are going wrong. That is a huge thing. Now, I will tell you, there have been a couple of instances where I have been in a bit of a pickle, and I have not been very good at this. In fact, I can think of a few instances where my watch would be buzzing because somebody would be texting me in the middle of a situation where I had a mechanical or something like that, and I have literally taken my watch off and thrown it down the trail because I'm like, this is too much. I need to be able to focus in on this. Now, that is sort of the opposite of mindfulness. What can you do? Focus. Find ways around your problems, but by doing it with using all the tools that I talked about before, by being present, by doing those types of things that kind of get you to focus in on what you can do in that particular moment. You may find that by taking that moment to sort of get recentered, by focusing in on your breath, by taking that moment, taking just that beat, doesn't mean that you're sitting there and your mind is racing trying to come up with solutions to these types of things, but it gives you that little bit of a pause to maybe get out of your brain, which is maybe telling you, oh, this sucks. Oh, the weather's awful. I can't handle this hill. My brakes are full of clay because the C&O is so damn wet. All of those types of things. Sometimes just pulling over, taking a moment, and drink your water, feel how that is going down. Maybe have a little snack. I can assure you a snack is always a good idea. Any of those things are part of mindfulness tools that help you overcome those challenges. Now, Mindfulness is not going to find that solution for you, but it's maybe going to give you a chance to separate from the situation and then get to where you need to go. Whether it is remembering that repair trick, remembering a YouTube video that you saw once about how to use zip ties and duct tape to fix a broken rack, recalling the number of times that you changed a flat tire and how quick that can be when you do it step by step. Even changing a tire can be a meditative process, a mindful practice, as it were. So those are the types of things that you can use as ways to overcome those challenges in a mindful way. So those are all just different ways that I think about when it comes to mindfulness in bicycle travel. And like I said, came up with 3 stories. And these were all, I have to say, I was so actually impressed with this. I was trying to find instances, stories of folks online sharing mindfulness practices. And I thought, I wonder if our friends in the artificial intelligence realm can come up with something. And they're all really good. And I thought these stories were so fun that I actually am going to apply AI voices to them and maybe a little sound effects and stuff like that. I think that these are really cool. And I think that they're little anecdotes that might be of interest for you as you think more about how mindfulness can impact you and your cycling adventures. So I've got 3 stories here, all going to be read by different people, not really people, but computers acting like people. And yeah, I think that these are all really cool. So I enjoy The Hill and the Hawk, Raindrops and Revelations, and The Sunset Cycle. Here we go.
Story 1. The Hill and the Hawk. Emma had always been slightly intimidated by hills on her bike tours, often dreading the physical challenge. One sunny morning, as she approached a particularly steep hill that twisted out of sight, her heart sank. Remembering her mindfulness practice, she decided to shift her focus from the challenge to her surroundings and her breathing. As she pedaled slowly upwards, she noticed a hawk circling above. Instead of obsessing over her tired legs, she watched its graceful flight, aligning her breaths with each of its wide arcs. With each inhale, she felt stronger. With each exhale, she released her fear. By the time she reached the top, she wasn't just proud of conquering the hill, but was deeply moved by the connection she'd felt with the hawk and the sky. This experience transformed how she viewed hills, no longer obstacles, but opportunities to be present and find joy.
Story 2, Raindrops and Revelations. On a grey, drizzly day, Mark set out on a long-anticipated bike tour across the countryside. As the rain started to pour harder, his initial reaction was frustration. The wet roads made cycling tougher, and he worried about catching a cold. However, Mark decided to use this as an opportunity to practice mindfulness. Focusing on the sensation of raindrops hitting his skin and listening to the rhythmic patter against his helmet, Mark began to appreciate the rain's cleansing feel. He noticed the fresh smell of earth in the air, a scent only brought out by rainfall. The lush, vibrant colors of the wet foliage became strikingly vivid. By the end of his ride, Mark was soaked but exhilarated. The rain, which could have ruined his trip, had instead enhanced his sensory experience and deepened his appreciation for nature's nuances.
Story 3. The Sunset Cycle. Lily was an avid cyclist, often using her rides to escape the stress of work. One evening, feeling particularly overwhelmed, she hopped on her bike without a destination in mind. As she rode through the city, she decided to practice being present, focusing on the here and now instead of her usual worries. As the sun began to set, she found herself on a quiet path along the river. Stopping by a bench, Lily sat down to watch the sunset. She paid attention to the colors changing in the sky, the cool evening breeze, and the gentle sounds of the water. This moment of peace allowed her to reflect calmly on her challenges, realizing they were manageable and not as daunting as they seemed in the heat of stress. Lily returned home feeling refreshed and with a new perspective on how to handle her problems. All thanks to a mindful moment with the setting sun.
See, weren't those were cool, weren't they? I thought they were a good way to wrap things up here. So, well, I hope that this is helpful for you. I hope that this was eye-opening and maybe got you thinking about mindfulness in your bicycle travel. I have found that this is stuff that I think I was always aware of. I just didn't have names for it. And you may find that to be the case too. But if that wasn't the case, I hope that maybe this is something that gets you thinking a little bit more about what your rides are like and how you go about doing them and all of the different things that I talked about, whether that is mindfulness in general, being present, that non-judgmental observation, mindful planning, setting your intentions, and all of those various elements that are boiled down to being present as part of your ride. I hope that you get to utilize these things as part of your next bicycle trip. And as always, we like to close out the show with a special shout out to the Pedal Shift Society. Because of support from listeners like you, Pedal Shift is a weekly bicycle touring podcast with a global community, expanding into live shows and covering new tours. If you like what you hear, you can support the show for $5, $2, or even $1 a month. And there's one-shot and annual options if you're not into the small monthly thing. Check it all out at pedalshift.net/society. On to the society. Kimberly Wilson, Caleb Jenkinson, Cameron Lean, Andrew McGregor, Michael Hart, Keith Nagel, Brock Didis, Thomas Skadow, Marco Lowe, Terrence Manson, Harry Telgadis, Chris Barron, Mark Van Ram, Brad Hipwell, Mr. T, Nathan Poulton, Stephen Dickerson, Vince LaGreco, Cody Florchinger, Tom Beninati, Greg Braithwaite, Sandy Pizzio, Jeff Muster, Seth Pollock, Joseph Quinn, Drew Porter, Byron Patterson, Joaquin Robber, Ray Jackson, Jeff Fry, Kenny Mikey, Lisa Hart, John Denkler, Steve Hankel, Miguel Quinones, Alejandro Aviles Reyes, Keith Spangler, Greg Towner, Jody Zeranin, Lucas Barwick, Michael Baker, Brian Bechtal, Reinhard Bigel, Greg Middlemiss, Connie Moore, William Gothman, Brian Benton, Joan Churchill, Mike Bender, Rick Weinberg, Billy Crafton, Gary Matushak, Greg Latoile Lopez, James Sloan, Jonathan Dillard, John Funk, Ronald Paroli, Dave Roll, Brian Hafner, Misha LeBlanc, Ari Messenger, David Kropke, Todd Grossbeck, Wally Estrella, Sue Reinert, John Lico, Stephen Granada, Philip Mueller, Robert Lackey, Dominic Carroll, Jackie McCullum, John Hickman, Carl Presseau, David Neves, Patty Louise, Terry Fitzgerald, Peter Steinmetz, Timothy Fitzpatrick, Michael Lazewski, Hank O'Donnell, David Zanoni, David Weil, Matthew Sponsella, Chad Reno, Spartan Dale, Carolyn Ferguson, Peggy Littlefield, Lauren Allensmith, Eric Burns, Thomas Pearl, Darren McKibben, Richard Stewart, Dave Fletcher, Jack Smith, Luke Parkinson, Ryan Patterson, Sarus Faravar, John Gardner, Sam Scruggs, Dwight Pintinger, Connie Bowder, Rob Merrifield, and thanks to all past and anonymous folks for helping make this show happen. Thank you for joining. You can find Pedal Shift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedal Shift project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available.